another episode of Kassick's Corner, the podcast made by a teacher, made for teachers, and literally anybody who will listen. And hopefully, if you're tuning in, the title of this or the vibe of this somehow sounded interesting to you. So thank you so much for just being here and supporting me and like listening to me yap for a little bit. Don't know how long this one is going to be. We're just gonna dive in and see where it takes us because I was thinking a little bit earlier today while I was like in the midst of my own like Sunday scaries and like thinking about going back to work tomorrow and trying to like relax based on like the last couple days that I had, which I'll get into, is what am I gonna talk about today? What am I gonna get on here and yap about? Like I feel like I have stuff I want to say, but like I wasn't like ready to talk about a lot of it. Like I didn't have like the energy to get on here and then like say all these big things that I like wasn't really ready or like had space for or had given space for myself to like talk through because while this is like my podcast and I can talk about whatever the hell I want, which is like super cool, I also like don't just want to come on here and basically just yap about things that don't feel like super meaningful and purposeful because that's not the point of it either, right? Like the point is that I want myself to get something out of it, but I also want like you guys to get something out of it. So while I have like ideas and stuff I'll talk about later, I today just like wasn't ready for that. So as I was making lunch for this week and like food and dinner and all this stuff, I was just thinking, I was like, okay, well, I have to do it because I made this like plan to like go and do this thing and I want to like keep doing it. So I basically just came over here and I was like, hey, I'm just gonna get on there and yap about whatever, like what's happening in my life and see where that takes us. So the title of this video probably makes sense. It probably goes with something, but I don't know what that's going to be right now. I'm literally just here to just yap for today. Um, because as much as I wish I had like a, fancy thing to like go off of, I'm really just a guy trying to make this work. So all that said, here's kind of like what I've been up to a little bit. So the past week we had our first week back from school from winter break. So as we all know, it's kind of a wreck because we're all tired, we're all like super exhausted, still adjusting, and it's just like a long week overall. We had professional development the first 2 days. So we had like a teacher work day, which was fine. I got to catch up on some paperwork, some parent communication, things like that. For those of you who don't know, I do teach special education now. So when I say paperwork, I really mean like, like at least 60% of my job is just like doing paperwork. Um, and so I was able to catch up on that. On Tuesday, we had PD, and then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we had kids back, which was really nice to see them all. And while we were finishing all of that, it's just like a bunch of time for us to, catch up, get together, all that kind of stuff. So it was a really nice week, kind of chill. And Saturday, which was yesterday, oh my God, what happened to like taking time off for ourselves? Anyway, on Saturday, I hosted a speech and debate tournament at my school because I'm the assistant coach there, and it was a really good opportunity. Like I'm super exhausted from it because I don't know if you guys don't know anything about like how those tournaments usually go. Is when you sign up to like coach a speech and debate thing, you probably should know like what it's about. But way back when, like I didn't, so no shame if you don't know anything about it because it's kind of like still for some reason not a lot of people know. So on Saturday, our school was hosting, so we had to get there at, I was at school, I think at 6 a.m. on Saturday, just to, like help set up. We were like loading concessions, we were moving tables, we were opening all the classrooms, we were taking pictures of all the classrooms to make sure all the stuff got back to to the same place it needed to be at the end of the tournament. So there's a lot of work like that Saturday morning to kind of go in and prepare the school. And I've hosted tournaments before, so this is like not news to me. And the kids on our team have hosted tournaments before, so it was like not new to them. Everyone kind of like went through their motions. And by 7 o'clock, other schools were showing up, students were showing up. We were planning on having like 400 plus people in the building that day. And there's some other like political things that got in the way of this tournament specifically. But like I said, it's like it's not something that I want to get into today, so we're just not gonna. So we hosted the tournament. It was a really long day. I think, like I said, like 7 o'clock, kids were showing up, and then I was kind of like running the back thing with the other assistant coach in what's called the tab room. So I was kind of like going through like and making sure all the rounds got posted, making sure students were in there like participating, making sure everything kind of went smoothly. And it's a lot of like problem solving. It's a lot of like scheduling. It's a lot of planning ahead. It's a lot of all of those things all at once. And we kind of did that all day. So we ran probably 8 rounds overall because we did 3 rounds of each wave, and then we did a finals for each of them. So we got out. I think the tournament ended at 8:30 after we did awards, which was super cool because that's pretty early. For those of you who know anything about the speech and debate world, sometimes rounds get behind, schedules get behind, and then we leave tournaments at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. So having it done by 8:30 was kind of a blessing. So we appreciate that. And after like making sure all the rooms and stuff were put back, I think I got out of there. I think I got home at like 10. So it's actually not too bad. I was able to like kind of enjoy that evening and kind of hang out and recuperate a little bit because after spending, all day on your feet, all day like problem solving, all day kind of like being involved and being like on, like as teachers and coaches like have to be like with students, I was able to kind of just like come home and like relax and chill, which was really nice. So at the speech and debate tournament, I constantly was thinking about like my old team because of the fact that um at my old school, there had never been like a speech and debate team like at all. And I think I alluded to this in my first video about like how I became a teacher. And when I was in my first year of teaching, some kids came up to me and they were just like, "Hey, like we should do this." And then I kind of like took it and ran. And it was the first one that ever existed at that school. Like I had to get it approved through all like the associations, the leagues. I had to get it approved like through admin, through all these other people. I, wasn't getting paid for it at the time. I eventually like fought to get paid for it. And I did like a lot of work, and like to this day, it's like the thing that I'm like most proud of, right? And I keep alluding to that. One day I'm going to come on here and have the capacity to like speak to it a little bit more. But honestly, it's still one of those things that's a little bit, you know, vulnerable for me to like talk about because I don't know how I'll react as I like start really getting into it because I don't know, it's just like a big part of like that journey and like that school that I was at, and I think that's what has got me going into this train of thought that I thought I would end up being at today, and I didn't think that I would get here. So the fact that throughout all day yesterday, the only thing I was thinking about was like my old students and my old team and how we had the potential to do all these really cool things, or how they could have been there, or how we could have been there, and just kind of all like that potential of it all. And I think that is the thing that um really really just like gets me thinking about the whole like profession in general. Is I think we get really bogged down with all of these things that we're supposed to do. I think last week I talked about burnout, and the idea is that even though we do all these things for like a really good reason, I think that burnout really does get to us. And that's kind of where, it makes it really hard sometimes to like keep going. So all that to say, someday I'm going to get on here and be able to talk about that team and what it means to be in a more straightforward capacity. I'm just not there today. But all that to say, my cat is rubbing against the mic. So if you guys can hear that, I don't know what the mic is going to pick up. That was a long pause either way. Um, so eventually someday I'm going to get on here and be able to talk about that because I think that's an episode and a conversation that needs to happen, and I'm excited to happen. But like I said, today I'm just kind of like catching you up on like where things are at. So yeah, last week was easy. Friday was kind of exhausting. I was like ready for it to be over. Saturday was super exhausting. So today, when I kind of like woke up, I was just like, you know what, I'm sleeping in. I'm not doing anything because the second I try to get up and try to make myself do something is the second that burnout is going to hit like a lot more. And kind of like sitting here and thinking about like it's already January. It's January 2025, which is insane. And the idea that we're already halfway through this year is mind blowing to me about how fast time moves and how fast things are going. That you just get like bogged down with it sometimes. And I planned earlier today, I planned like a spring break thing, like around spring break. It wasn't like a trip or anything. It was for grad school. I have to like go down and like do labs for like counseling stuff. So that's like early March, and like the fact that we're already planning for like early March is like completely insane, right? Because time moves so quickly. And on the way home, a song came on. I don't remember which song it was, but it was like a slow song that like kind of got me thinking about kind of just like this idea of, okay, what am I gonna talk about? I had the speech and debate tournament yesterday. I was like trying to mine myself for content because that's like what it's about, right? So I was trying to mine myself for like what can I get on and talk about. And then the song came on and I started thinking about just like what I kind of was speaking earlier about, like this potential about like what it could have been if I was with the team that I had always been with, or if come May that I am like ready to move on to something new, or if in a couple months, like this season is going to end for speech and debate, or if, next year I'm at like a brand new place, or on Monday when the kids come back, I get to like celebrate with them and be with them and all these things. And there's a chapter. This podcast episode is all over the place, just by the way, like that's the nature of it today. Very sorry. There's a chapter in the book that I'm working on publishing that is titled, and I remember this because it like makes me like it gives me chills every time I think about it. And the title of this chapter of this novel that I want to publish, this teaching novel, it's called "It's Getting Easier to Say Goodbye." And the whole point of that the whole point of that conversation in that little chapter is to kind of go through this thing as a teacher of, and it's like an impossible thing to replicate if you're not one, or have not been in this realm of the world at all, or have never had a teacher that you really have connected with. It's really hard to like explain that process. That said, this chapter is called "It's Getting Easier to Say Goodbye." And I was thinking about that driving home from the tournament, and I was thinking about it driving home today after like planning ahead so much that, in a few months I'm going to have to like say goodbye again, right? And that's not to say that I am going to go to a brand new school, or I'm going to go to a brand new job, or I'm going to like do all these brand new things again. But it is to say, like in May, I am going to have to, you know, move on from this like group of students that I've already like grown super attached to. Like it's been what, 4 6 months with them, half a semester, half a year. And the fact that like I'm already like kind of planning ahead to what it's going to feel like for me when I have to like look them in the eyes and say like, hey, like bye for the summer, or potentially like, hey, I'm not going back to this school, right? Because you never know what's going to happen. And I think right now my future is just like very, very unknowing. That I think about this concept a lot, where it's like, is it getting easier to say goodbye, or is it just one of these things that as teachers we kind of like force ourselves to do? I wrote this I had this idea, I think around like my third or fourth year. There was just like this perfect little class of students when I was teaching seventh grade, and it was, God, I don't know. I think it was the year right before COVID, to be honest, because these kids like just graduated, so they must have. Anyway, we had this perfect little group of students, and I didn't know that it was like that serious all the time, like until the end of the year, right? But like, we had our little moments. We would do like fun little callbacks in class based on like vines. So I don't know if you guys are hip on this lingo, but like I'm gonna do some of them for you, and I'm gonna explain the situation about how we like grew kind of together as a class. And here's one example. So I would say, road work ahead. And then my class would then respond by saying, yeah, I sure hope it does. And to this day, it's like it makes me laugh, because I would just shout in class. I'd be like, road work ahead. And then they would do the response back. And I would also do, it's an avocado. Thanks. I was waiting because I wanted to see if you guys would respond on your own. So I would do those like kind of callbacks in class. Like it was one of those classes where they helped me kind of design that, because I was still early on in teaching, and I went to class one day and I was like, guys, like this counting down thing, this me standing up here, this like me begging for your attention all the time when like you're just yapping in your seats, like it's not going to work. So like what would work to get your attention? And I was like, we could do callbacks or blah blah blah. And then eventually we stumbled on this Vine callback situation, and it was a lot of fun. So then like for the rest of the year, like I would do that, and like probably to this day some of them like still memorize that, because, well, one, because it's like super famous Vine, but two, it's like this little like moment in class that we had, right? um Later that same year, like I fake wrote up a few kids as a class, like we did like a little prank to that whole like group of students, and like I pretended to be really mad at this group of kids for like not working on their group project or something. And trust me, it was like kids that could handle it, I promise. Like they were fine, and we laugh about it now. um in that same year, it was, yeah, no, it was 2019, because that's when Endgame came out, right? Whatever year Endgame came out, because I had gone to see Endgame like the weekend it like came out, Avengers Endgame, and just in case you guys didn't know what I was talking about, I had gone to see that weekend, and my class was just like being like extraordinarily frustrating that day. Like they would not stop talking, they would just like not be getting any work done. So I said, you know what, guys? Every time that someone interrupts me today, or you're talking when you're not supposed to, I'm going to go up on the board and I'm going to write a letter to this puzzle. And this puzzle, this hangman puzzle, is a spoiler for Endgame. So if you haven't seen it, I'm going to spoil it for you right now. So they thought I was joking, like they thought I was like insane, like criminally insane, because at the time, I don't know, it was what 5 years ago, which is crazy, but the hype and the just like excitement for Endgame like has not been replicated since, and I could talk about that for that's a whole nother podcast, right? Um, that said, I they didn't think I was kidding. They thought I was kidding, and I was just on something different that day. So I walked up to the board, and every time they were disrespectful, every time they interrupted me, every time that they did something they weren't supposed to do, I wrote another letter, and it turned into a bloodbath. It really did. I spoiled the whole movie for them, and a lot of kids were just like mad and angry and yelling at each other. So anyway, later on that year, I mentioned Endgame and all these little moments because it's just like little things like that, right? And I still remember like that class, and I still remember a lot of the kids in that class, and it hasn't been that long, right? That was only like a few years ago. But come the end of the year, and this is what I didn't realize about them, and I promise there's like a method to this story, and then we got to the end of the year and we were talking about like, oh my God, like we're moving on to eighth grade, like we're gonna miss you so much, blah, 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 blah. And it was like that last week of school. Well, that class, that specific class, spent like that entire week just like in tears because of the fact that these were our last little moments together. Like we had our last little circle time together. We had our last grammar practice together. We had our last like final together. We had our last like project together. And these kids just like hyped up every one of those moments. Like I was getting like little gifts. I was, you know, just sitting with them and like soaking in the moment because I remember even at that time, like third or 3 or 4 years in, I can't remember what year it was, but 3 or 4 years in, just sitting there and like being completely in awe of the fact that like, oh shit, like these kids actually like me too. Like they actually care. Like they're actually invested, and I actually help them be invested. Like I gave them a place where they can feel that sort of way, right? And I don't think it was until that time where I really started to realize like, damn, I really love these guys. And it was just like this special little moment. And that's not to say like prior to that, like none of my classes I didn't feel the same way, but that's why the title of this chapter was It's Getting Easier to Say Goodbye, because by this time in my career I had like said a bunch of hard goodbyes like at the end of the school years. Like it's the same thing. Kids graduate, kids move on to, eighth grade above you, and it's like, oh my God, I'm gonna miss you so much. Like it never was easy. And I had thought by this time in my career that like, oh, it's getting easier. Like, I'm prepared for this. I know what's going on. And that last day of school, a bunch of things happened. One is kids just started shouting at me. They were like in little cards they would write, or we were having our last little circle time, and I would pass out notes to kids and give them a little bracelet. Which, again, it'll be someday there'll be a story about all of these. But I give a gift at the end of every year, and we had our like little moment where we did that. We had our little circle time, and they would say, "I love you 3,000," and they would write it in their cards. They would say like, "I love you 3,000," and the way that like to this day, like thinking about like their little handwriting, their little like seventh grade handwriting, they're all graduated now, they're all like old now, so but that like moment, or like kids like running down the hall being like, oh my God, I'm gonna miss you. And there was one specific moment, and I remember this because it wasn't a kid that I like specifically thought like I was super close to. It wasn't a kid that I like specifically like worked hard to make a relationship with. um it wasn't a kid that I had thought I had impacted. Him and his buddy like came up after school, like all the bell had already rung, yearbooks had been signed, like we did all the crying, like we did all the things. Him and his buddy came up to me, and they're like, "Oh my God, Mr. Kassick, like have a good summer. We're gonna miss you." And they both gave me a hug, and I hugged the first one, and then the second one, he was like, kind of like shaky, and like he hugged me, and then he just like squeezed me like a little tighter, like kind of in the middle there, and I was like, what the hell? Like that's crazy, because the way that I like still remember that and look back on it like so fondly, in a way that it's like, how could I have possibly done that? Like how could I have possibly made that much of an impact to then, you know not even realize what impact I'm making. And then all of a sudden I went into like this like deep downward spiral of like, damn, it is not getting easier to say these goodbyes. In fact, it's getting like much harder. And I in this teaching book, right, it's all about stories. It's all about like students and their relationships to like me and each other and the system and all these different things, and like just telling stories about all of those things. And this is one of the first ones I wrote early because at the time I had a blog. That blog is still floating somewhere on the internet. I don't remember what it's called or if the website still works or whatever, but I wrote a lot on there. And I remember like going home and thinking about this and the fact that like I can't even like think about that scene from from Endgame anymore. Like I love you 3000. Like I can't even think about that without thinking about these kids. Or I, at that point realized that oh my god, I can do all of these things. I can be silly, I can be, firm, I can write detentions, I can fail them in classes, I can write stories with them, I can teach them grammar. And then at the end of it all, we all walk away with this sense of just like we had this like little beautiful moment together and we all look back on that like fondly, and it was just this beautiful little moment. And I say that because that experience by itself is not unique, right? Like I am not the first teacher to experience something like that. I will not be the last teacher to experience something like that. That was never my last year to experience something like that. And the title of that chapter that I keep going back to, it's getting easier to say goodbye. It's this fact that like you prepare for it as a teacher, like you prepare for it and you're like, okay, well, if this is what it's going to be like I'm going to get better at it, right? Like my first year, even like saying goodbye to those eighth graders moving into high school at the time, I was like, okay, like this is tough, this is hard, I'm going to miss these guys so much. Like don't even some of them aren't even sticking around, like they're just going to be off and they're going to be elsewhere and I'll never see them again. And my first year I was like, shit, this is hard, this is the hardest thing I've ever had to do. And my second year, I said the same thing because I tracked with the kids from sixth to seventh grade because I got a new job. I tracked with them into seventh grade, so I taught them some of them for 2 years. And I was like, ah, shit, it's not getting easier. It's actually getting harder. And then my third year was all of this. And then my fourth year was COVID. And I remember sitting at home with all of these kids that, were at home in whatever circumstance. And we were trying to like do the end of the year stuff and like saying goodbye. And I was thinking about them on Zooms and I was thinking about them just like how are they because I couldn't see them. And it's just at the end of that year it wasn't easier either. Like I remember passing out yearbooks that year because it was my first year hosting the yearbook, and we had like a little drive line set up where we could pass out yearbooks, and I was able to say goodbye to a lot of kids, but that did not mean that every teacher did, and that did not make it any easier for me to then walk into the next year. And then that next year was like a whole year of COVID in a brand new class where I got to know kids a little bit differently. And all of a sudden it's getting harder and harder. And then I tracked with kids again. And then then this is the worst one of it all, right? Is like at the end of my last year is I quit my job at my old school, and nothing was harder in that moment than standing in front of the first class of students and saying like, hey guys, like I haven't told anyone this, I don't want it to get out, like we want to respect the process. And then telling them after I passed out like this really meaningful gift and like my end of the year bracelet, and like then saying, hey guys, like I'm actually not coming back next year. And then like having to like sit and like do that 3 more times. And then I have lots of stuff to say about this moment, but it's still to this day something I look back on and realize like that was my 8th year of teaching, and that was the hardest goodbye I've ever had to say because I was saying goodbye to all of it. I was saying goodbye to like all of these things that have happened there, all of like the magic, all of like the little experiences, all of like the little hallway conversations we would have, all of the walks we would take, all of the learning that would happen, all of the and realize that learning was like one of the last fucking things that I said. And if that doesn't like prioritize where teachers' hearts and minds are at all times, then it doesn't even like of course not. Like of course it's not about learning. It's about all those other things first. And I think that's what people don't understand. And even when I was first teaching, I was like, yeah, it's going to get so much easier to do all this stuff because I'm going to get better at it. I'm going to get better at it. And I did get better at it, but that also means that it's getting harder to do the goodbyes. It's harder to do that harder stuff because of the fact that you begin to care so much. And I think all of that to say is as I look forward to whatever my career has next in store for me or whatever I have next in store for me in general, is I don't anticipate these goodbyes like getting easier. And it's just like this is like irony that I think about all the time in teaching is it's like, yeah, I feel better, like I'm gonna move on. The school year's over, like I'm so relieved. And then it's just this fact of like this like little hole in your heart, right? That says like, oh, but these kids are gone, like they're leaving. And if it mattered at all, they'll flag you down in a grocery store. They will send you messages, they will find you. They'll come get coffee with you when they're back from college. And if it mattered, they'll stick around. And if it mattered, you never really have to say goodbye, right? Because they'll always be there. But it's that like feeling at the end of the year, or it's that feeling around now when you're looking forward and thinking about, oh, we only have a few months left. Like, I'm just getting started. Like, we're just getting into it. And I think that's what I've been thinking about a lot recently because, like I said, I don't know where my next journey will take us. Will take me. I don't know where I'll end up in a year. I don't know where I'll be in a year. Like, there are so many things in flux, and sitting at that tournament yesterday, I was like, damn, I'm starting to really like these kids. Like, I thought this school would be, I thought I wouldn't get attached here. I thought I wouldn't have to say goodbye again. I thought I wouldn't have to stand in front of a class of students and say, hey guys, like this is my last year. Like, I'm not coming back. I didn't think that I would have to go through those feelings again because I came into the school very much ready to say like I'm going to do what I need to do and I'm not going to let myself get stuck. I'm not going to let myself feel the burnout of it all. And here I am again, I had a panic attack at work on Friday. Like the first week back, like I literally had a panic attack at in my little office and there's a lot of things that work to eventually trigger one, but yeah, it's not easy to do any of these things. And the fact of that, the fact of this is just saying, like, I can sit here and say, like, all of these things are true. And I can sit here and say that all of it mattered. And I can sit here and say that, like, I don't know what's next. But the only thing that I realize is it's never going to get easier to do any of these things. And I think that's so scary in a lot of ways. And, you know, I realize that I care a lot about a lot of things and I could yap about all of that for much longer. But I think I'm going to let this episode breathe a little bit and cut it off here because I don't know. One, I feel like I said, I feel like I'm just yapping a little bit, and I feel like there was a lot of important things that I said here. But the moral of this story is just that, catching up on my life a little bit, I'm realizing that I thought I would be in a space right now where it would finally get easier to say goodbye, or it would finally get easier to do all these things that I want to do. And then, I suddenly begin to realize that maybe it isn't supposed to get easier. Maybe it isn't supposed to be easy to do any of these things because if you're a good teacher, you're going to keep caring and you're going to keep working hard and you're going to keep basically pushing yourself to burn out and you're going to keep crying when you say goodbye at the end of the year because if you're a good teacher, it's never really going to get easier. So, I think that's where I'm going to cut it off for today. Like I said, I could keep yapping, but this has no purpose anymore because there was never really an outline. So, a shorter episode for today. I'm going to try to get something better next week. Speaking of which, I'm going to try to drop episodes once a week at this point. I'm trying to get like a consistent time, but like as soon as school starts getting busy again and like grad school starts up, I'm not going to have a specific time to do this. So I'm aiming for once a week. So far, that's been Sunday. And if you're following along with all of that, please leave a review. Please leave a comment. Slide into my DMs, homies. Like they're wide open. That was so embarrassing. Why did I say it like that? Anyway, please reach out. Let me know if you have any questions, comments, reviews. Please fill it all out. Any sort of engagement is super helpful to me to keep doing this, making sure I'm getting content out there. And eventually, if I want to turn this into something, because my silly goofy videos on TikTok in a week might not be able to exist anymore because our government cares more about stuff that they don't understand than stuff that they could actively fix, that the people want to be fixed. So we don't have to get into that because that's above my pay grade, clearly. But, if I can't make silly, goofy videos on TikTok anymore, I'm going to have to make silly, goofy videos somewhere else. So follow me on literally anything else and we'll see what pans out. My handle is Kassick's Corner at all socials. That is Kassicks Corner. You know how to spell that. And follow me, subscribe. I'll put out new videos every Sunday or every day I feel like it. Hopefully once a week. Thanks so much for sticking out. You guys, I'm gonna get so good at this outro, I promise. I'm gonna get there someday. Here, let me. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today in my little corner of the internet. I hope you enjoy the rest of your time. Good luck out there, and I'm really proud of you. I'll see you in the next one.